So let's talk about some of Ken's normals. His stand jab, it's a 5 frame startup and it hits crouches and it's +2 on block. The main thing is you're going to be cancelling it into other light attacks for the most part unless it hits. So it's a really good move, primarily because it hits crouches and allows you to be kind of safe from the launchers. Stand strong is actually a really good move. It has a really good hurt box. It's got further range than stand jab, and it's +7 on hit, which is massive and can lead into, your crouch forward. It's also used for frame traps, but it's definitely a good poking tool. His stand forward is actually a really interesting move too. It can crush some low attacks, and it's actually quite useful in footsies. At a range where you can't really commit to your forward, it helps to make your poking game a little more varied, so you don't just eat raw launches all day. Stand roundhouse is a really good move. It's got a very slow start up and it's quite easy to whiff punish, but the reward is massive if you hit it on counter because you get a crumple. You can actually also hit confirm it relatively easily. Close jab, similar to stand jab, multi-purpose pressure tool, hits crouches, stops your raw launchers, and it's got a pretty good start up as well. Close fierce is actually kind of a cool anti-air. It's a bit wonky, but it does work in some situations. It also forces standing, so it's used for a lot of your heavy damaging combos. In some places you'll use target combo, but in some you'll be using this. Close forward is your best close attack in this game. It has massive hit, stun, massive block advantage, great for confirms, used for BMBs. It hits crouches and it also frame traps. It's just all round amazing move, and it doesn't push back too much, so you actually can tip throw afterwards. Crouch short is a really good button. It is your free frame normal attack, so it is a go-to in a lot of situations. It's used for combos as well, and it's used for a few punishes and mix-ups. The range on it's not great, so you're not going to be punishing with it all the time, but it's definitely a button that you should be using quite a lot. Your crouch forward is probably one of Ken's best buttons. It's your standard sort of Shoto crouch forward. It's cancelable, great poke. It's got a slightly worse hitbox in this game. The thing is, a lot of characters have moves that crush low forwards, and everyone has a raw launch which will go under low attacks, but generally speaking it is still a really good move. It's quite negative on block actually at -8, but it can be cancelled into fireball relatively safely. Your crouch roundhouse is actually a really good button. It's got a longer range than crouch forward, and it's not as negative on block as you'd expect it to be. Its startup's pretty slow, but it's still actually an okay footsie tool for sure. Onto the jumping attacks. Your jump short is great for ambiguous cross-ups. It's really hard to see at certain ranges, but it has very little block stun, so normally if you're hitting them in the head with it, you can actually be punished, especially by characters that have got like free frame normals. Your jump roundhouse is your standard Shoto jump roundhouse. It's your longest range jumping attack, so you're going to be using it to punishing fireballs and things like that. Your jump forward is your go-to cross-up attack. It's got a pretty good range and it's just good all round really. It's got more block stun than jump short. It's not as ambiguous, but it certainly is your go-to button. Neutral jump forward is the best neutral jump button in my opinion, because it's got the longest range, so that makes it good for air to air. Target combo is exactly what it's always been. It's just a move that's used in some combos. You kind of can hit confirm it, but for the most part you may as well just do one of the standard Ken hit confirms. Forward is his best command normal for definite. It is his staple mid-range poking tool. It's at most it's -2 on block, but has 5 active frames, so if you space it correctly you're pretty safe. On counter hit it also hits into super, which is a pretty good hit confirm. It's kind of hard to do, but it's definitely one of the more advanced things you need to be doing. And it's just all round one of the buttons that you're going to be using constantly with Ken, because it's how he safely builds meter. Back forward, it's his overhead. It's it's pretty slow, to be honest. You can actually react to it. He has other things to fake it out with, because you have that close forward, which looks very, very similar. If they're crouching and you score a counter hit, it will cause a bounce, which can lead into pretty good damage. So it's a nice little gimmick, but it's generally just for like tacking on little bits of damage here and there. Your forward roundhouse, it's got the same properties as back forward, but you will be walking a little bit before you do the attack. If you hold it down, you get a carrot similar to Sagat's, or you can just use it as a fake if you don't carry into something. It's okay. It's a little bit slow, so it's kind of gimmicky. It's more about kind of making them hesitate, and then like maybe going into a light punch DP, which is pretty good. But yeah, it's kind of gimmicky for the most part. Your jab shuriken, it only has lower body invulnerability, but it does lead into more damage after the shuriken, which is really awesome. It's great for blowing up crouch techs and things like that. And also in some anti-air situations it's actually quite good to use, even though it will nearly always trade, just because you get a combo after if you're certain of the kind of range they're jumping at you, and especially if they're jumping very, very close at that angle where you would normally go to the crouch fierce. The jab shuriken does the same thing, but you can convert off it way easier. Your strong shuriken is the go-to anti-air across the board. 7 frames of full invulnerability, 5 frames startup, so it can be safe jumped, but it is still by far his best shuriken. Fierce shuriken is primarily for ending combos. It also works well versus fake jump-ins, such as what you'd expect from a Zangief. It also works well against wall dives from Vega. You can also use it to safely tag in your partner. EX shuriken is your only reliable way to actually get out of safe jump setups. Fierce shuriken in theory should work, but it never seems to consistently work, and occasionally you'll get a trade, but this is really your only reliable way outside of alpha counters. Your Hadouken, it's the same as Ken's Hadouken has always been in the new gen fighters. It's worse than Ryu's. It's pretty good for mid-range, and it's normally how you're ending your block strings. It's, you know, it's got such a bad recovery that you're not really going to be zoning with it too often, but it's nice to throw out there every once in a while, especially if you've got a gem set up that requires blocked specials. You know, it's definitely worth doing. Your Tatsumaki, it goes over fireballs like Ryu's, but it's definitely not as effective because of the speed and because it doesn't just straight knock them over. It does leave them standing, which in combos is brilliant because you can bring another character and do a standing combo. It's generally really good, to be honest. It's not got the same sort of versatility as Ryu's, but just from sheer damage output, very, very good move. ES Tatsumaki is the best way for Ken to get me to solo damage. If you punish and you hit an EX Tatsu and you've got your 1 frame links down, you get ridiculous damage, so you definitely have to learn how to do those links. Your super has 2 frames startup, so it's a really, really good way to punish certain situations. This seems to have trouble punishing things at like any sort of range, but you know, it does do the job. It will punish things like, you know, Cody's criminal upper, and so you do want to use it quite often. There are a lot of situations where it's just your go-to punish, and it makes matchups a lot easier for Ken because they're worried about pressing buttons. Your cross art is no different from every other cross art. It can anti-air, but it's got quite a slow start up, so you do have to do it a little bit early. But you know, it takes away red life, so that alone is really useful.